The gunshot that killed Helena Foster's third husband echoed through the saloon in Salida, Colorado, on a sweltering August afternoon in 1882. And as she watched Marshal Samuel Yates drag away the man who had pulled the trigger over a card game dispute, she made a vow that this time would be different. No more marriages, no more heartbreak, no more burying men she had grown to care for. She stood there in her black mourning dress, the third such garment she had worn in 7 years, and felt something inside her chest turn to stone, as cold and unyielding as the Rocky Mountains that loomed over their small mining town. Helena had arrived in Salida as a bride of 18, fresh from Boston with stars in her eyes and dreams of adventure in the West. Her first husband, Thomas, had been a kind banker with gentle hands and a weak heart that gave out 2 years into their marriage. She had been 20 when she buried him in the hillside cemetery, convinced that their love had been real even if brief. Her second husband, William, a merchant with a booming laugh and generous spirit, had lasted 3 years before a bout of pneumonia took him during a harsh winter. At 25, she had started to wonder if she was cursed. Then came Robert, a mine foreman who had courted her with wildflowers and promises of growing old together. They had managed 4 good years before that bullet found him in the Golden Nugget Saloon, and now at 32, Helena decided she was done tempting fate. The months following Robert's death passed in a blur of settling his affairs and managing the small dry goods store he had left her. Helena threw herself into work, rising before dawn to open the shop and staying late to balance the books by lamplight. She became known throughout Salida as the Widow Foster, a woman who kept to herself and had a reputation for being fair but distant in her business dealings. The other women in town treated her with a mixture of pity and respect, while the unmarried men eventually stopped trying to court her after she turned down every invitation to dinner, every offer to escort her to church, every attempt at conversation that ventured beyond the price of flour or fabric. Winter came hard that year, and Helena found a strange comfort in the cold. The snow that blanketed the town seemed to insulate her from the world, and she spent the long evenings in her rooms above the store, reading by the fire and wondering if this was to be her life solitary, safe, and utterly alone. She told herself she was content. She told herself that love was not worth the inevitable loss that followed. She told herself that the hollow feeling in her chest was simply the price of wisdom. Spring arrived in April of 1883, with a sudden thaw that turned the streets to mud and brought new faces to town. Among them was Samuel York, a cowboy who rode in on a paint horse with saddlebags that had seen better days and eyes the color of mountain sage that seemed to see right through the walls Helena had built around herself. He was 35, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and hands that looked equally comfortable holding reins or a rifle. He had come to Salida looking for work at one of the nearby ranches and had taken a room at the boarding house down the street from Helena's store. Their first meeting was unremarkable. Samuel walked into the dry goods store on a Tuesday morning looking for supplies, coffee, beans, tobacco, and a new pair of work gloves. Helena served him with her usual efficiency, tallying his purchases and wrapping them in brown paper without meeting his eyes for more than a moment. But Samuel noticed things that other men had missed. He noticed the way her hands moved with practiced grace, the way she kept her face carefully neutral, and the way a flicker of something pain, loneliness, fear crossed her features when she thought no one was watching. "Thank you, madam," he said, tipping his hat as he gathered his parcels. His voice was low and rough, like gravel smoothed by river water. "I expect I will be seeing you again soon." Helena nodded dismissively and turned to straighten the shelves, but she found herself listening to the sound of his boots on the wooden floor as he left, the jingle of his spurs fading into the morning bustle of the street outside. Samuel did return, more frequently than his needs strictly required. He would stop by for a tin of tobacco when he still had half a tin at home, or claim he needed thread when his shirts were all intact. Helena was not fooled, but neither was she flattered. She had seen this pattern before men who thought they could heal her, fix her, make her forget. They never understood that she did not want to forget. Remembering was how she kept herself safe. "You are wasting your time," she told Samuel one morning in May when he appeared for the 3rd time that week. "If you are looking for a wife, there are plenty of younger, prettier women in this town who have not buried 3 husbands. Samuel leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful rather than offended. "I'm not looking for a wife," he said simply. "I'm looking for coffee, and your store happens to sell the best in Salida, but I would not mind some conversation while I am here. Seems to me like you might be tired of your own company." Helena felt her carefully maintained composure crack just slightly. "You know nothing about what I am tired of." "Maybe not," Samuel agreed, "but I know something about being alone. Been drifting from ranch to ranch for 15 years now, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Gets to where the silence in your own head is louder than anything else." He picked up the coffee tin she had placed on the counter and examined it as though it held some great secret. "Sometimes I think about what it might be like to have someone to talk to at the end of a long day, someone who understands that life out here is hard and does not always go the way you plan." Despite herself, Helena felt something shift inside her chest. "Life never goes the way you plan," she said quietly. "Anyone who thinks otherwise is a fool." Samuel nodded, paid for his coffee, and left without pressing further. But the conversation stayed with Helena long after he was gone, echoing in the empty spaces of her store and her heart. Over the following weeks, an unexpected friendship began to develop between them. Samuel would stop by the store, and they would exchange a few words that gradually grew into longer conversations. He told her about his life as a cowboy, the long cattle drives from Texas, the lonely nights under the stars, the satisfaction of working with horses and the land. Helena found herself sharing small pieces of her own story, carefully edited versions that left out the worst of the grief and fear. They talked about books they had read, places they had been, dreams they had once harbored before life taught them to be more cautious. Samuel never pushed, never presumed, never made Helena feel like she owed him anything beyond the courtesy she showed all her customers. And perhaps that was what made her defenses begin to crumble. He treated her not as a tragic figure to be pitied or a prize to be won, but as a person worth knowing for her own sake. One Saturday in June, Samuel appeared at the store just as Helena was closing up for the day. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk," he said, holding his hat in his hands. "The evening is fine, and I thought you might enjoy seeing the wildflowers up on the ridge trail. No expectations, just a walk between friends." Helena's first instinct was to refuse, to retreat to the safety of her solitary rooms, but something in Samuel's steady gaze made her hesitate. She thought about the long, empty evening stretching ahead of her, another night alone with her books and her regrets. She thought about the wildflowers she had not bothered to notice in years, too focused on putting one foot in front of the other to look up and see what beauty remained in the world. "All right," she heard herself say. "A walk would be nice." They made their way out of town along a trail that wound up through the foothills, the Rocky Mountains rising majestically in the distance. The air was sweet with the scent of pine and sagebrush, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. Samuel kept his pace measured to match Helena's, pointing out clusters of columbine and Indian paintbrush that dotted the hillside. They walked in comfortable silence, punctuated by occasional observations about the landscape or a bird call echoing through the trees. Helena felt something unfamiliar stirring within her, not quite happiness, but a loosening of the tight knot of grief she had carried for so long. The mountain air filled her lungs, and for the first time in months she felt like she could breathe deeply without that stabbing pain in her chest. "Why Salida?" she asked suddenly. "Of all the towns you could have stopped in, why here?" Samuel considered the question as they paused at an overlook. "Honestly, I was tired. Tired of drifting. Tired of having no place that felt like home. I had been through Salida once before, about 10 years back, and remembered it as a decent town with good people. Figured it was as good a place as any to see if I could settle down." He glanced at her, his sage-colored eyes serious. "What about you? How does a woman from Boston end up running a dry goods store in a Colorado mining town?" Helena wrapped her arms around herself, though the evening was warm. "I came here as a girl with romantic notions about the West. I'd read too many adventure novels and thought life out here would be exciting and free." She laughed without humor. "I got the exciting part right, just not in the way I imagined." "You could go back," Samuel said gently. "To Boston, I mean. Start over somewhere familiar." "No," Helena said immediately. "Whatever I was when I left Boston died a long time ago. I may not have chosen this life, but it is mine now. All the people I loved are buried here. I could not leave them behind." Samuel was quiet for a long moment before he spoke again. "My mother used to say that the people we love are not in the ground, they are in here." He tapped his chest. "We carry them with us wherever we go. They become part of who we are." Helena felt tears prick her eyes, the first she had shed since Robert's funeral. "That's a beautiful thought," she whispered, "but sometimes the weight of carrying them is almost too much to bear." "Then maybe you need someone to help you carry it," Samuel said. He did not reach for her, did not try to pull her into an embrace, but simply stood beside her as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. They walked back to town in the gathering twilight, and when they reached the store, Helena surprised herself by inviting Samuel to join her for supper. It was nothing fancy, just bread, cheese, and some cold chicken she had bought from the restaurant down the street, but they ate together at her small table while oil lamps cast warm circles of light around them. They talked about everything and nothing, and Helena realized with a start that she was enjoying herself, that the sound of another person's voice in her rooms felt right rather than intrusive. As the weeks passed, their friendship deepened into something neither of them quite knew how to name. Samuel found excuses to be near Helena's store even when he did not need supplies. He would carry heavy crates for her when deliveries arrived, repair the loose step on the stairway leading to her rooms, or simply sit on the bench outside and whittle while keeping her company during slow afternoons. Helena began to look forward to seeing him, to find herself listening for the sound of his spurs on the boardwalk, to smile more readily when he walked through her door. The people of Salida noticed, of course. In a town that small, little remained private for long. The other shopkeepers began to comment on how often the York Cowboy was seen at the Foster widow's store. The church ladies whispered among themselves about whether it was proper for a woman in mourning to be keeping company with a man. But Samuel paid them no mind, and Helena surprised herself by doing the same. For the first time since Robert's death, she found herself caring more about what made her happy than about what others thought was appropriate. One evening in July, Samuel invited Helena to accompany him to a barn dance being held at one of the nearby ranches. She had not been to a social gathering in over a year, had not danced since Robert's death, and her immediate instinct was to refuse. But Samuel looked at her with such hope in his eyes that she found herself agreeing before she could think better of it. The night of the dance, Helena stood in front of her mirror for far too long, fussing with her hair and second-guessing her choice of dress, a deep blue cotton that had been hanging in her wardrobe unworn because it seemed too cheerful for a widow. But when Samuel arrived to collect her, the look on his face told her she had chosen well. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering her his arm. The ranch was alive with music and laughter when they arrived. Lanterns hung from the rafters of the barn, casting a golden glow over the dancers swirling across the hay-strewn floor. A fiddle player, a guitarist, and a man with a harmonica provided lively music that made it impossible to stand still. Helena felt her heart racing with something that might have been excitement or might have been fear, she could not quite tell which. Samuel led her onto the dance floor and took her hand with a gentleness that made her breath catch. He was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her through a reel with confident steps and a smile that reached his eyes. Helena stumbled at first, her body remembering the movements even as her mind tried to resist, but Samuel's steady presence gave her confidence. Soon she was laughing, actually laughing, as they spun and stepped in time with the music. They danced several sets, pausing only to catch their breath and drink cups of cool cider. Helena met Samuel's friends from the ranch, other cowboys and ranch hands, who treated her with easy respect and welcomed her into their circle without judgment. She met the ranch owner and his wife, who thanked her for supplying their household with quality goods. She felt, for the first time in what seemed like forever, like she belonged somewhere beyond the four walls of her store. During a slower waltz, Samuel pulled her close, one hand at her waist and the other clasping hers gently. Helena could feel the solid warmth of him, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather and something uniquely him. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "Helena," he said quietly, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. "I know you have had more than your share of loss. I know you have every reason to guard your heart, but I need you to know that being around you has changed something in me. You make me want to stop drifting. You make me want to build something lasting, to have a home and a reason to come back to it every night. Helena's throat tightened with emotion. Samuel, I'm not asking you for anything, he interrupted gently. I'm just telling you what is true. Whatever happens between us, wherever this goes, I want you to know that you matter to me. You are not just another stop on the trail. You are the destination I did not know I was looking for. Helena felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack in earnest. I am terrified, she whispered. Every man I have loved has been taken from me. I cannot go through that again. I cannot bury another husband. Samuel pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his expression serious and tender. I cannot promise you that nothing bad will ever happen. Life out here is unpredictable, and tomorrow is never guaranteed for anyone. But I can promise you that however much time we have, whether it is 50 years or 50 days, I will spend every moment of it loving you with everything I have. Is not the time we get together worth the risk of eventually losing each other? Is not loving someone fully worth the pain of potentially saying goodbye? Helena wanted to say no, wanted to insist that safety was more important than happiness, that solitude was preferable to the devastation of loss. But looking into Samuel's eyes, feeling the solid reality of his presence, she found she could not make herself believe those lies anymore. She had been existing rather than living, surviving rather than thriving. Samuel was offering her something precious, the chance to love again, to feel again, to be fully alive again, rather than simply going through the motions. I need time, she said finally. I need to think about this, about what it would mean. Samuel nodded, his expression understanding. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere. They finished the dance in silence, but it was a comfortable silence, full of possibility rather than awkwardness. Samuel walked Helena home through the warm summer night, the stars overhead so bright and numerous they seemed to blanket the sky. At her door, he squeezed her hand gently and then stepped back, making no demands, no assumptions. Helena climbed the stairs to her rooms and lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and feeling her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. She thought about Thomas, sweet and gentle Thomas who had been taken too soon. She thought about William, whose laugh had filled their home with joy even in the harshest winter. She thought about Robert, solid and dependable Robert, who had made her feel safe right up until the moment that Bullet tore him away from her. And then she thought about Samuel, patient and steady Samuel, who asked for nothing but offered everything. She thought about how he made her feel seen, how he made her laugh, how he made her want to open her heart despite every logical reason not to. She thought about growing old alone, about spending the rest of her life behind walls of her own making, about dying without ever having taken the risk of loving again. By the time dawn light began to filter through her window, Helena had made her decision. It terrified her, but it also filled her with a tentative, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she deserved a chance at happiness. Samuel appeared at the store later that morning, as she had known he would. Helena was behind the counter, organizing a shipment of buttons and ribbons, when she heard his distinctive step on the threshold. She looked up and met his eyes, and whatever he saw in her face made him go very still. I have been thinking, Helena said, her voice only slightly unsteady, about what you said last night, about taking risks and living fully rather than just surviving. Samuel waited, his expression guarded with hope. Helena took a deep breath. I am still terrified. I am still convinced that loving you will end in heartbreak, because that is what love has meant for me. But I am more terrified of living the rest of my life without ever knowing what we could have been together. I am more afraid of dying alone, having never taken the chance, than I am of losing you someday. Samuel crossed the store in 3 long strides, but he stopped just short of touching her, his eyes searching her face. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I'm saying yes, Helena whispered. Yes to taking a chance. Yes to letting my guard down. Yes to seeing where this might go between us. I'm saying that you were right. The time we have together is worth the risk of eventually losing each other. Samuel let out a breath that might have been a laugh or a sob, and then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Helena clung to him, feeling simultaneously safe and vulnerable, terrified and exhilarated. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her cheek, and she let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe this time would be different. Their courtship, such as it was, became the talk of Salida. Samuel made no secret of his intentions, escorting Helena to church on Sundays and sitting with her during services, bringing her flowers picked from the hillsides, joining her for supper every evening after he finished his work at the ranch. Helena, for her part, gradually let go of the rigid control she had maintained over her emotions. She allowed herself to smile freely, to laugh at Samuel's stories, to touch his hand when they walked together through the town. But old fears died hard, and there were nights when Helena would wake in a cold sweat, her heart pounding with dread that something terrible was about to happen. She would lie in the darkness and imagine all the ways she could lose Samuel: a riding accident, a bar fight, an illness, a random act of violence. The possibilities seemed endless, and the fear would grip her so tightly she could barely breathe. One such night in late August, Helena found herself standing at her window at 3 a.m, staring out at the dark street below and trying to calm her racing heart. She did not hear the knock at first, soft as it was, but when it came again, she hurried to the door, her mind immediately jumping to worst-case scenarios. Samuel stood in the hallway, fully dressed despite the late hour. "I saw your lamplight come on," he said. "I was out checking on a mare about to foal, and when I was heading back to the boarding house, I noticed your window. Are you all right?" Helena wanted to lie, to send him away, to maintain the illusion that she was handling everything fine. But the concern in his eyes and the exhaustion in her own heart made her honest. "No," she admitted. "I'm not all right. I woke up terrified that something was going to happen to you. I started imagining all the ways I could lose you, and I could not make myself stop." Samuel stepped inside when she gestured him in, closing the door quietly behind him. "Come here," he said gently, leading her to the chairs by her cold fireplace. He sat down and pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her like he could shield her from her own fears. "I need you to listen to me, Helena. Really hear what I'm saying." She nodded against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. "You cannot live your life waiting for the other shoe to drop," Samuel said. "You cannot love someone while simultaneously planning for their death. I know you have been through things that no person should have to endure. I know you have earned every bit of your fear. But if we are going to do this, if we are going to build a life together, you have to find a way to be present in the now instead of constantly worrying about what might happen tomorrow." "I do not know how," Helena confessed, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I do not know how to stop being afraid." Samuel held her tighter. "You start by remembering that today, right now, I am here. I am alive and healthy and holding you. You start by focusing on what we have instead of what we might lose. And you let me help you carry the fear when it gets too heavy." He tipped her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "You are not alone anymore. Helena, you do not have to face everything by yourself." Something in Helena broke open at those words, and she wept against Samuel's chest, grieving not just for the husband she had lost, but for all the years she had spent isolating herself, convinced that solitude was the only way to stay safe. Samuel held her through it all, murmuring soothing words and stroking her hair, making no move to leave even when the tears eventually subsided into hiccuping breaths. "Stay," Helena whispered when she could speak again. "Please stay tonight. I do not want to be alone." Samuel hesitated. "Helena, I do not want to compromise your reputation." "I do not care about my reputation," she said fiercely. "I am a 32-year-old widow who has buried 3 husbands. My reputation has been fodder for gossip for years now. All I know is that I need you here, need to feel you beside me so I can remember that you are real and alive, and mine, at least for now." Samuel searched her face for a long moment, then nodded. He carried her to the bed and laid her down gently, then stretched out beside her on top of the covers, fully clothed. He pulled her back against his chest and wrapped his arms around her, and Helena finally felt safe enough to sleep. They woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sounds of the town coming to life. Helena stirred in Samuel's arms, momentarily disoriented, then remembered the night before and felt her cheeks flush. But Samuel simply pressed a kiss to the top of her head and said, "Good morning, beautiful. How are you feeling?" "Better," Helena admitted. "Stronger. Less alone." She turned in his arms to face him. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for not letting me push you away." "Always," Samuel promised. "Whenever you need me, I will be here." From that night forward, something shifted between them. The fear did not disappear entirely. Helena suspected it never would, but it no longer controlled her every action. She learned to recognize when her anxiety was spiraling and to reach out to Samuel instead of retreating into herself. He, in turn, was patient with her moments of panic, talking her through them without judgment or frustration. As summer turned to autumn, their relationship deepened into something profound and unshakable. They spent their days working Samuel at the ranch, Helena at her store, and their evenings together, cooking simple meals and talking about their plans for the future. Samuel began to speak of marriage, tentatively at first, watching Helena's reactions carefully. "I know the idea terrifies you," he said one evening in October, as they sat on her small porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. "But I want you to be my wife, Helena. I want to build a home with you, maybe start a family if you are willing. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep with you in my arms every night. I want the whole world to know that you are mine and I am yours." Helena's first instinct was panic, the word husband sending a chill through her despite the warmth of the evening. But then she looked at Samuel's face, open and hopeful, and so full of love, and she forced herself to really consider what he was offering. Not another loss waiting to happen, but a partnership, a true joining of lives and hearts. Samuel was not asking her to erase the past or pretend her previous marriages had not mattered. He was asking her to believe that loving again was possible, that happiness could be found even after devastating loss. "Ask me again at Christmas," Helena said finally. "Give me a few more months to get used to the idea, to make peace with my fear. And if I still feel the same way then, if I still believe that what we have is worth the risk, then I will give you my answer." Samuel smiled, slow and warm as summer sun. "I can wait until Christmas. I can wait as long as you need." The months between October and December passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Helena found herself daydreaming about what married life with Samuel might look like, waking up beside him every morning, sharing meals and conversation, maybe even eventually having children of their own. The thought both thrilled and terrified her, but the thrill was growing stronger than the terror. She also found herself talking to her previous husbands, something she had not done since shortly after their deaths. She would visit the cemetery on Sunday afternoons, standing before their graves and speaking to them as though they could hear her. She told Thomas about Samuel's gentleness and patience. She told William about Samuel's humor and the way he made her laugh. She told Robert about Samuel's steadiness and his unwavering commitment to building a future together. "I think you would have liked him," she whispered to the cold stones. "I think you would have approved, and I think maybe you would want me to be happy again. I've spent so long mourning you all that I forgot how to live. But Samuel is teaching me to hope again, to believe that my story is not over just because yours ended too soon. I will always love you, all of you, but I am learning that the heart has room for more than one love. You will always be part of me, but I need to give myself permission to move forward." The wind whispered through the pine trees surrounding the cemetery, and Helena chose to believe it was her husband's giving their blessing. Christmas arrived with a fresh blanket of snow that turned Salida into a winter wonderland. Samuel had been working extra hours at the ranch to earn money for a ring, though he tried to be subtle about it. Helena pretended not to notice his increased absences, using the time to prepare her own answer to the question she knew was coming. On Christmas Eve, Samuel arrived at the store just as Helena was closing up, his arms full of evergreen boughs and his face flushed with cold and excitement. "I thought we could decorate your rooms," he said, "make it festive for the holiday." They spent the evening draping greenery over the mantel and doorways, laughing as they pricked their fingers on pine needles and argued playfully about the best placement for each branch. When they finished, Samuel built up the fire and made coffee, while Helena lit candles throughout the space. The rooms glowed with warmth and light, more festive and alive than they had been in years. "Helena," Samuel said, setting down his coffee cup and reaching for her hand. "I know I said I would wait until Christmas to ask, but I do not think I can wait another minute. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have given me purpose and hope and a reason to believe in tomorrow. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person, and I want to spend whatever time we are given building a life with you." He slid off the chair and knelt before her, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, nothing ostentatious, but perfect in its understated elegance. "Helena Foster, will you marry me? Will you take a chance on us, on this love we have found, on the future we could build together?" Helena looked at Samuel's upturned face, at the love and hope shining in his sage-colored eyes, and felt every last bit of her resistance crumble away. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, I will marry you. I'm still scared, but I am more excited than scared. I am ready to believe in love again, to believe that we can have something lasting and true. I am ready to be your wife." Samuel surged up and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion and joy that took her breath away. Helena kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her hope and fear and love into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling, tears streaming down Helena's cheeks. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you so much it terrifies me. But I love you." "I love you too," Samuel said, sliding the ring onto her finger. "And I promise you, Helena, I am going to spend every day proving that you made the right choice." They were married on a cold January morning in 1884 in the small church at the edge of town. Helena wore a dress of cream-colored silk that she had ordered from Denver, simple but elegant. Samuel wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his face glowing with happiness. The ceremony was small and intimate, attended by a handful of friends from the town and the ranch, but it felt perfect in its simplicity. When the minister asked if Helena took Samuel to be her lawfully wedded husband, she did not hesitate. "I do," she said clearly, looking into Samuel's eyes and seeing her whole future reflected there. And when Samuel slid the wedding band onto her finger, her fourth wedding ring, but the first that felt like a promise rather than a curse, Helena felt something shift inside her chest. The heavy weight of grief she had carried for so long lifted just slightly, making room for something new: hope. Their wedding night was spent in Helena's rooms above the store, which would be their home until they could afford to build something larger. Samuel carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests, and they spent the evening talking and kissing and learning each other in new ways. Helena had been married before, had shared physical intimacy with her previous husbands, but this felt different, more meaningful, more connected. She was not just going through the motions or doing what was expected. She was choosing to be vulnerable with someone, to share not just her body but her heart. Later, as they lay tangled together beneath the quilts, Helena traced patterns on Samuel's chest and marveled at how right this felt. "I was so sure I would regret this," she admitted quietly. "I was so convinced that letting myself love you would end in disaster. But right now, in this moment, I cannot imagine any other choice I could have made." Samuel pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Love is always a risk," he said, "but the best things in life usually are. We do not get to choose how much time we have together, but we do get to choose how we spend it. And I choose to spend every moment loving you as well as I possibly can." The early months of their marriage were an adjustment for both of them. Samuel moved into Helena's rooms, and they learned to navigate shared space and merged routines. There were small conflicts. Samuel left his boots in the middle of the floor. Helena insisted on a level of order he found unnecessary, but they worked through each disagreement with patience and humor. More significantly, they learned to support each other through difficult moments. When Helena woke from nightmares about losing Samuel, he would hold her and remind her of the present moment. When Samuel struggled with the transition from drifting cowboy to settled husband, Helena gave him space to process while making sure he knew he was loved. They built their relationship on a foundation of honest communication and genuine affection, and it showed in the way they moved together, anticipated each other's needs, and found joy in simple daily routines. Spring came again, bringing new life to Salida and new possibilities for the Yorks. Samuel had been promoted to ranch foreman, a position that came with increased responsibility and better pay. Helena's store continued to thrive, her reputation for quality goods and fair dealing, bringing in customers from the surrounding area. Together, they began to save money with the goal of eventually buying their own small ranch. One evening in April, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Helena realized she had something important to tell Samuel. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had waited to be certain before saying anything. Now, with the confirmation from the town doctor still ringing in her ears, she could no longer keep the news to herself. "Samuel," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion, "I went to see Dr. Morrison today." Samuel turned to her immediately, concern flashing across his face. "Are you all right? Are you ill?" "No," Helena said quickly, reaching for his hand. "I'm not ill. I'm pregnant. We are going to have a baby." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, his expression shifting from concern to shock to pure, undiluted joy. "A baby?" he repeated, as though he could not quite believe what he was hearing. "We are going to have a baby?" Helena nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Due sometime in late November or early December, the doctor thinks. I know we did not plan this so soon, but—" Samuel cut her off by pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This is the best news I have ever received," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are giving me everything I never thought I could have: a home, a wife, and now a child. I cannot believe how lucky I am." Helena clung to him, feeling her own joy mixed with an undercurrent of fear. She had never been pregnant before, had sometimes wondered if perhaps she could not have children. The fact that it had happened now with Samuel felt like a gift and a test all at once. "I am scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if—" "Then we will face it together," Samuel said firmly. "But let us not borrow trouble from tomorrow. Right now, today, we are going to have a baby. That is cause for celebration, not fear." Helena let herself be convinced, let herself feel the joy and anticipation that Samuel's enthusiasm kindled in her own heart. They spent the evening making plans, discussing names and imagining what their child might be like. Samuel was convinced they would have a son, a boy they could teach to ride and ranch. Helena suspected it might be a daughter, a little girl with Samuel's eyes and her determination. In the end, they agreed that it did not matter, boy or girl, the baby would be loved beyond measure. The pregnancy was not easy. Helena suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and there were days when just the smell of coffee, her own livelihood, made her violently ill. Samuel took over many of the tasks at the store, working his ranch duties in the morning and then spending his afternoons helping Helena with customers and inventory. The people of Salida were charmed by the sight of the big cowboy carefully measuring out flour and wrapping parcels with surprising delicacy. As Helena's belly grew, so did her anxiety. She could not shake the feeling that something terrible was going to happen, that fate would not allow her this happiness. She would lie awake at night, one hand pressed to her stomach, feeling the baby kick and move, and whispered desperate prayers that everything would turn out all right. Samuel remained her anchor through it all, steady and patient and endlessly reassuring. "You're going to be a wonderful mother," he would tell her. "Look at how much love you have to give. This baby is already so lucky to have you." In late October, when the leaves were turning gold and the air carried the first hints of coming winter, Helena's worst fears came true, but not in the way she had expected. She was in the store, arranging a display of winter coats, when the first pain hit. It was too early, nearly 2 months too early, and she knew immediately that something was wrong. "Samuel," she called out, trying to keep the panic from her voice. He was in the back room, unpacking a shipment. "Samuel, I need you." He appeared instantly, took one look at her face and understood. Within minutes, he had sent someone running for the doctor and carried Helena upstairs to their bed. She clung to his hand as the pains intensified, terror and determination warring in her chest. She could not lose this baby, not after everything. She could not survive another loss. Dr. Morrison arrived quickly, his weathered face calm and professional as he examined Helena. "The baby is coming early," he confirmed, "but not so early that there is no hope. These next hours are going to be difficult, but I have seen babies born at this stage survive and thrive. You need to stay calm and trust your body." What followed were the longest, most painful hours of Helena's life. The labor was hard and complicated, and there were moments when she was certain she could not endure another minute. But Samuel never left her side, holding her hand through every contraction, wiping her brow with cool cloths, murmuring encouragements even when she cursed him for putting her through this. His presence was the only thing that kept her from giving in to despair. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the window, a thin, reedy cry filled the room. Dr. Morrison held up a tiny, squalling infant, a boy, red-faced and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. "He is small," the doctor said carefully, "but his lungs are strong and he seems otherwise healthy. The next few days will be critical, but I think he has a fighting chance." Samuel cut the cord with shaking hands while Dr. Morrison wrapped the baby in soft blankets and placed him in Helena's arms. She looked down at the impossibly small person she and Samuel had created, at his tiny fingers that curled around hers and his eyes that opened to stare solemnly up at her, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting for you." Samuel knelt beside the bed, his own face wet with tears as he touched their son's soft cheek with one gentle finger. "He is beautiful," he said in wonder. "He is perfect. What should we name him?" Helena had thought about names throughout her pregnancy, but now none of them seemed quite right. She looked at this tiny fighter who had come into the world too soon, but with such determination, and she knew. "Stephen," she said. "His name is Stephen York." Samuel smiled. "Stephen, I like that. Welcome to the world, Stephen. Your mother and I are so happy you are here." The next few days were touch and go. Stephen was too small to nurse properly, so Helena expressed milk and they fed him with an eyedropper, a few precious drops at a time. Dr. Morrison visited twice daily, monitoring Stephen's progress and teaching Helena and Samuel how to care for such a premature infant. The entire town seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the York baby would survive. Helena barely slept, terrified that if she closed her eyes, Stephen would slip away. She sat in the rocking chair Samuel had bought for the nursery corner they had set up, holding her son against her chest and feeling his tiny heartbeat. Samuel would find her there in the middle of the night, her eyes glazed with exhaustion, and he would gently take Stephen so Helena could rest for a few hours. They worked in shifts, neither willing to leave their son alone even for a moment. On the 5th day, Dr. Morrison examined Stephen and smiled for the first time since the birth. "He is gaining weight," he announced. "Not much, but enough. His color is better, his breathing is stronger. I think he's going to make it." Helena broke down completely, sobbing with relief and exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude. Samuel wrapped his arms around both her and Stephen, and they stood there as a family, united in their joy and love. Stephen did make it. Slowly but surely he grew stronger and bigger, hitting milestones that seemed miraculous given his precarious start. He learned to nurse properly, then to smile at his parents' faces, then to reach for the toys they dangled above him. By the time his first birthday arrived in late November of 1885, he was a healthy, happy toddler with his father's sage-colored eyes and his mother's dark hair, and no one would have guessed how fragile he had been at birth. The experience of nearly losing Stephen changed something fundamental in Helena. She realized that she had been so focused on protecting herself from future grief that she had been only half living, always braced for disaster. But watching Stephen fight for his life, seeing his determination to survive and thrive, taught her that life was precious precisely because it was fragile. She could not control what happened tomorrow, but she could choose to fully embrace today. She began to let go of the constant anxiety that had plagued her since Robert's death. Oh, she still had moments of fear, she was human after all, and old wounds ran deep, but they no longer controlled her every action. She learned to trust that Samuel would come home from the ranch each evening, to believe that Stephen would grow up healthy and strong, to have faith that the future held more joy than sorrow. Their lives settled into a comfortable rhythm. Helena reduced her hours at the store, hiring a young woman named Emily to help with the daily operations so she could spend more time with Stephen. Samuel continued to work as ranch foreman, saving every spare penny toward their dream of buying their own land. They spent their evenings as a family, playing with Stephen, sharing meals, and planning for the future. When Stephen was 2 years old, Samuel came home one evening with news that made Helena's heart soar. "The Anderson Ranch is for sale," he said. his voice vibrating with excitement. "It is not large, maybe 100 acres, but the land is good and the house is solid. I have been talking to the bank, and with what we have saved combined with a loan, we could afford it. We could finally have our own place, Helena. We could build the life we have been dreaming about." Helena did not hesitate. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us buy the ranch and make it our home." The Anderson Ranch became the York Ranch in the spring of 1887. It was hard work, harder than anything Helena had done before, but it was also deeply satisfying. They raised cattle and horses, grew vegetables in a large garden, and made improvements to the house and outbuildings. Stephen thrived in the wide open spaces, learning to walk and then run across the fields, helping feed the chickens and collect eggs, following his father around like a devoted shadow. Helena discovered that she loved ranching, loved the connection to the land and the animals, loved the sense of building something lasting with her own hands. She and Samuel worked side by side, partners in every sense of the word, and their marriage grew stronger with each passing season. They had their disagreements. Of course, living and working together constantly meant they sometimes got on each other's nerves, but they always talked through their conflicts and never let resentments fester. In 1889, Helena became pregnant again. This time, she was less anxious, more confident in her body's ability to carry and deliver a baby. Samuel was thrilled at the prospect of expanding their family, though he worried about Helena's health given the difficulties of Stephen's birth. But this pregnancy was easier, and when their second son was born in December, just after Stephen's 4th birthday, it was a much smoother process. They named him Samuel Jr., and he was bigger and healthier than Stephen had been at birth, with a full head of dark hair and a set of lungs that announced his presence to the entire ranch. Stephen was fascinated by his baby brother, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to bath time. Helena and Samuel watched their sons together and marveled at the family they had created. The years passed in a blur of work and love and simple daily pleasures. The ranch prospered, allowing them to pay off the bank loan ahead of schedule and even hire a few ranch hands to help with the heavy labor. Stephen and Samuel Jr. grew into strong, capable boys who could ride before they could read and who knew the value of hard work. Helena kept her hand in the dry goods business by occasionally going to town to help Emily, but her primary focus was the ranch and her family. On a warm evening in June of 1895, Helena and Samuel sat on the porch of their ranch house watching Stephen and Samuel Jr. play in the yard with the ranch dogs. Stephen was nearly 10, tall and lanky with his father's quiet confidence. Samuel Jr. was 6, full of energy and mischief and charm. Beyond them, the Rocky Mountains rose majestically against the sunset sky, and the fields were dotted with cattle contentedly grazing. "Do you remember the day we met?" Samuel asked, reaching for Helena's hand. Helena smiled, lacing her fingers through his. "I remember thinking you were wasting your time trying to make conversation with the bitter widow Foster. I remember being certain that letting you into my life would end in disaster." "And now?" Samuel prompted, though his eyes sparkled with the knowledge of her answer. "Now I know that you were the best thing that ever happened to me," Helena said simply. "You gave me back my life, Samuel. You taught me that love does not have to end in tragedy, that taking risks is worth it, that happiness is possible even after devastating loss. I was so focused on protecting myself from grief that I forgot how to live. You reminded me." Samuel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You taught me things too," he said. "You taught me that home is not a place but a person. You showed me that settling down does not mean giving up adventure. It just means finding adventure in building a life with someone you love. And you gave me these boys, this ranch, this family. I spent 15 years drifting because I did not think I deserved anything more. You made me believe I was worthy of happiness." Helena rested her head on Samuel's shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, listening to his steady heartbeat. She thought about the girl she had been when she first came to Salida, so young and naive and full of romantic notions. She thought about the woman she had become after burying 3 husbands, so hardened and closed off that she had almost let life pass her by. And she thought about who she was now, a wife, a mother, a rancher, a woman who had learned that love was always worth the risk. "I love you," she said quietly, "more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I tried to push you away. Thank you for showing me that my story was not over." "Our story is just beginning," Samuel corrected gently. "We have got years and years ahead of us, Helena. Years of watching our boys grow up, of building this ranch into something even greater, of growing old together and annoying each other with our creaky joints and stubborn opinions. I plan to be around to annoy you for a very long time." Helena laughed, feeling lighter and happier than she had ever imagined possible during those dark days after Robert's death. "I am counting on it," she said. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Stephen called out that he and Samuel Jr. were heading to the barn to check on the new foals, and Helena waved her permission. The boys ran off, their laughter echoing across the yard, and Helena felt her heart swell with contentment. Life had not turned out the way she had planned when she first arrived in Colorado as a starry-eyed bride of 18. She had endured losses that would have broken many people, had faced grief and fear that had nearly consumed her. But she had also found love in its truest form, not the passionate but fragile love of youth, but the deep, abiding love that came from choosing someone every single day, from building a life together through hard work and patience and unwavering commitment. Samuel had kept his promise. He had spent every day proving that Helena had made the right choice in marrying him, in opening her heart one last time. He had shown her through countless small actions and grand gestures that love did not have to end in tragedy, that happiness was not something to be feared, but embraced. He had given her a family, a home, and a future that stretched out bright and hopeful before them. As the years continued to pass, the York Ranch became one of the most respected operations in the region. Stephen grew into a fine young man who eventually married a local schoolteacher and brought Helena her first grandchild in 1905. Samuel Jr. followed in his father's footsteps, becoming an expert horseman who earned recognition throughout Colorado for his skill in training even the most difficult animals. Helena and Samuel watched their sons build lives of their own while continuing to work the ranch together, their partnership as strong in their 60s as it had been in their 30s. They faced challenges, of course. There were hard winters that tested their resources, droughts that strained their cattle, and injuries and illnesses that reminded them both of life's fragility. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from each other and from the life they had built. Helena no longer lived in fear of losing Samuel. She had learned that while she could not control how much time they had together, she could control how fully she lived each moment, and that made all the difference. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1909, their sons and grandchildren gathered at the ranch house for a celebration. Helena looked around the crowded table at Samuel, with his gray threaded hair and laugh lines around his eyes, at Stephen and his wife and their 3 children, at Samuel Jr. and the young woman he was courting, at all the life and love that filled their home, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked softly, noticing her expression. Helena squeezed his hand beneath the table. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest woman alive. I am thinking that you were right all those years ago when you said that the time we had together would be worth the risk of eventually losing each other. I am thinking that I am so grateful I did not let fear keep me from this life we have built." Samuel raised his glass in a toast. "To Helena," he said, his voice carrying across the table and silencing the various conversations. "The strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. You made me believe in home and family and forever. You gave me everything I never thought I could have. I love you more today than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "To Helena," the table chorused, glasses raised. Helena felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears, tears of joy rather than grief. She had buried 3 husbands and sworn off marriage, convinced that her capacity for love had been exhausted by loss. But Samuel had shown her that the heart was infinitely expandable, that there was always room for more love, more happiness, more life. He had made her believe in love one last time, and that belief had transformed everything. As the celebration continued around them, as grandchildren chased each other through the house and Stephen's wife served the cake she had baked, as Samuel Jr. told stories that made everyone laugh, Helena leaned into Samuel's embrace and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" he asked, though his smile suggested he already knew. "For everything," Helena said simply. "For not giving up on me. For teaching me that love is always worth the risk. For giving me this beautiful life. For making me believe in happy endings." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every day with you is a happy ending," he said, "and every morning is a new beginning. I love you, Helena York. I have loved you from the moment you told me I was wasting my time in your store, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." They lived the rest of their lives on the ranch they had built together, surrounded by family and friends and the beautiful Colorado landscape they both loved. Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, with Helena holding his hand and their sons at his bedside. Helena grieved him deeply as she had grieved her previous husbands, but this grief was different. It was not the crushing, fearful grief of her younger years, but a sadness tempered by gratitude for all the years they had shared, for all the love they had known, for the family they had created together. Helena lived another 5 years after Samuel's passing, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. She spent her final years telling stories about the Wild West, as she had known it, about the 4 husbands she had loved and lost, about the cowboy who had made her believe in love one last time. She spoke often about how fear had nearly robbed her of the best years of her life, and how she was grateful every day that she had found the courage to open her heart one more time. When Helena Foster York passed away in her sleep at the age of 87, she was laid to rest beside Samuel in the cemetery overlooking their ranch. Their sons made sure the headstone reflected the love story that had defined their parents' lives. Helena and Samuel York, beloved parents and grandparents who proved that love is always worth the risk. And in the town of Salida, Colorado, their story became legend, the tale of a widow who had buried 3 husbands and sworn off marriage, and the cowboy who had made her believe in love one last time, teaching her that the greatest tragedy was not in loving and losing, but in refusing to love at all.